Welcome back and ting and ting and ting. I'm Mr. Giant and I'm back with another one for all you. And this one is called The Death of Alexander the Great, a mystery. I ran into this here the other day and I want to see what this is all about to take. So let's YouTube and sim, alright?
Only about a year ago, he lost his lifelong companion and second in command, Hephaestion. At the time, he wasn't sure what to do, or what had happened to Hephaestion. Was he ill from disease, or had he been poisoned by the enemy? The grief it caused him was unbearable, and he had to do something about it. In his emotional state of grief and anger, he issued orders to slaughter the neighboring town of Cosans as a sacrifice to his friend.
Whoa.
He couldn't stand the presence of Hephaestion's doctor, and ordered immediate execution for failing to cure his lifelong friend.
Wow.
There was no one who could replace Hephaestion's position as commander of the cavalry. He couldn't give the honor to anyone. He declared a period of mourning throughout his empire and abstained from food and drink. All the manes and tails of the horses were cut. He carried his friend's body to his funeral in Babylon, where he was buried with the rites of a king. With his close companion gone forever, Alexander was devastated. But now many months had passed, and it was time that Alexander the Great, the king of Persia, returned to his empire and continue making arrangements for his next expedition to conquer Arabia. But before he could even progress to his plans, he fell into bed with high fever. He felt so weak, he couldn't even lift his body to walk a few steps. He felt completely paralyzed. Wondering in his mind how much longer until he would recover, he was asked, if he should die, who would succeed him? Alexander said, the strongest. Soon enough, on June 10th, 323, Alexander the Great lay dead on his bed. The people around him began to mourn. The doctors felt hopeless. There began a quarrel among certain individuals on who would get the possession of his body. In the midst of all the chaos that fell on the kingdom, the doctors began to realize Alexander's body was not decaying. It had been 6 days. There was no response, no breathing, no heartbeat. Everyone pondered on the miracle. Was it so that Alexander the Great was truly the son of the Greek god Zeus? Okay, so let's just take a pause here. Wondering how really did this man die? Was he poisoned, assassinated? Or had he gotten malaria or typhoid?
Comment down below, from all the stuff that you've read and all of that, comment down below, tell me what your hypothesis is about this year, because every time there's a great leader who died unexpectedly, and especially if he's young, there's always a questioning of how he died, you know what I mean? Let's just take, for instance, in modern times here in America, John F. Kennedy. It's still going on about who killed him, this conspiracy. Shoot, lately there's been a conspiracy going around that he's not really dead, but he's going to come back from the dead and he's going to lead the country again. I don't know if they had that going on back in the day with Alexander or anything like that, especially with his body not decaying and nobody's understanding what's going on. That probably happened there too. But every time a great leader dies, people keep. And nowadays too, even a great musician or somebody like that, that he's not dead. He's somewhere out in the ocean in a small island or something like that. But this seems to be mysterious circumstances. Of course, for the time they couldn't explain why his body's not decaying. Maybe later on they will explain that.
To understand it all, we will have to rewind and start from the very beginning. In the year 356 BCE, on July 21st, in Pella, Macedonia, King Philip II and Queen Olympias gave birth to a child, Alexander III, or Alexander the Great as we know him. Growing up in his father's care, who was a notable military man, he soon became very much like his father, a great warrior. When Alexander was young, he was taught to fight, ride, and to endure hardships such as forced marches. At only the age of 12, the young Alexander tamed a giant wild horse, Bucephalus, which later became his battle horse for much of his life. King Philip was looking to prepare a future king, and so he hired the great philosopher Aristotle to educate his son. His tutor's influence had a profound effect upon him and sparked Alexander's interest in literature, science, medicine, and philosophy. By the time he was 16 years old, Alexander proved to be a brave young man, as he led his cavalry against the army known to be unbeatable.
16.
In the Battle of Chaeronea, Alexander defeated the band of Thebes and brought victory to Macedonia. 2 years later, in 336 BCE, his father was assassinated, and Alexander assumed the throne and embarked on the campaign that his father had been leading to conquest the whole of mighty Persia. At first, Greece was divided on accepting him as their leader, and the southern states of Greece were celebrating Philip II's death. While Athens had its plan to take control of the Corinthian League, Alexander first sent his army south and obtained their acceptance of his leadership. By the end of 336, he reissued treaties with the Greek city-states that belonged to the Corinthian League and was granted full military power in the campaign against the Persian Empire. The first thoughts of Alexander's mind was to secure Macedonia's northern borders, which he successfully did after conquering the Thracian tribal lines in 335. Soon he was delivered the news that Thebes, a Greek city-state, had forced out the Macedonian troops that were stationed there. Fearing a revolt among the other city-states, Alexander and his forces arrived in Thebes so quickly that the city-state didn't have a chance to put together allies for its defense. 3 days after his arrival, Alexander led the massacre of Thebes. As a result, the other Greek city-states, including Athens, chose to pledge their allegiance to the Macedonian Empire. In 334, Alexander began his Asiatic expedition, arriving in Troy where he faced the Persian king Darius III. Near the Granicus River, Darius's forces were swiftly defeated. Next, in the summer of 333, the troops of Alexander and Darius once again went to battle at Issus. This time, Alexander's army was outnumbered, but due to great use of military strategy, he was able to defeat the Persians again and cause Darius to flee. In November of 333, Alexander declared himself the king of Persia after capturing Darius and making him a fugitive. Next on Alexander's list was his campaign to conquer Egypt. Alexander easily achieved his conquest. After he had besieged Gaza, Egypt fell without resistance. In 331, he created the city of Alexandria. Later that year, Alexander defeated the Persians at the Battle of Gaugamela. By this time, Alexander the Great was not only the king of Persia, but king of Babylon, king of Asia, king of the 4 quarters of the world. Alexander's next conquest was in eastern Iran. In 327, he seized the fortress in Ariamazes. After capturing the prince Oxyartes, Alexander married Roxana, the prince's daughter. From eastern Iran, Alexander traveled with his army to India. In 328, Alexander defeated King Porus's army in northern India. However, Alexander restored him to his position as king, as he was very much impressed by Porus and won his loyalty and forgiveness. From there, Alexander reached the city of Susa back in Persia in 324.
And that was kind of dangerous. They just conquered the dude, and they admired him so much. He made him king again. But that dude still had to be subjugated to him, so, but that's the confidence, man. That's some serious confidence there. He's going to do as I say because he fears me.
Wanting to unite the Persians and Macedonians, he ordered many of his officers to marry Persian princesses at the mass wedding. Alexander also married 2 women on the occasion. The Macedonian army resented Alexander's attempt to change their culture and many mutinied. But after Alexander took a firm stand and replaced Macedonian officers and troops with Persians, his army backed down. And it was about this time in 324 that his lifelong companion, Hephaestion, died from fever. And soon after, Alexander the Great died in 323, a year later. And since then, many have not figured what was the real reason of his death.
Do tell.
When Alexander the Great died, his body did not decompose for 6 days, according to historical accounts. Today we may know the reason why, but back in the days, to the ancient Greeks, it confirmed their belief that Alexander was not a man, but a god. He was only 32 years old when he suddenly fell ill and died after 14 days of agonizing suffering. Since then, historians have questioned the cause of his death. Was it really disease? Or was it a planned murder? Historians suggest many reasons such as malaria, typhoid, drinking contaminated water, and alcohol. At the time of his death, doctors were bewildered at the fact that his body was not decaying. But our doctors today have explained what was the actual reason.
Oh,
Although this is a theory, scholars and clinicians say that Alexander the Great suffered from a neurological disorder known as the Guillain-Barré syndrome. This was probably the reason why his body did not decay, because maybe he was not dead at all.
what?
GBS is a rare neurological disorder which causes progressive paralysis, which starts from the feet and progresses throughout the body of the affected person.
But I mean, how could they not? He had to have some kind of pulse or something. Are we saying that back then, when in the great times of Aristotle and stuff, they couldn't check to see if he had a pulse? Because if he's in paralysis, something has got to be throbbing. Hmm.
GBS is a rare neurological disorder which causes progressive paralysis, which starts from the feet and progresses throughout the body of the affected person. It occurs when the body's immune system attacks the peripheral nerves in the body. Scholars have been speculating many causes to his death, but from all of the theories, this seems to be the most logical one. The doctors of the time of Alexander relied mostly on the absence of breath to determine whether the patient was dead
Oh,
or
okay.
not.
Okay.
And in the case of Alexander, who may have been suffering from GBS, was probably paralyzed or in a deep coma. And if we say maybe he was assassinated and didn't have any disease, then in that case his body would have decayed like any normal person. Alexander the Great may not have died when we think. We were only led to believe he was. If you liked our video, share it with your friends and
Wow. Now that I didn't know about Alexander the Great. I didn't know much about his death or anything like that. But no, that make for one intriguing historical tale there. I wonder if there was any because it did after he died, or he went into paralysis per se. Uh, a lot of people believe he was the direct son of Zeus. I wonder if anybody worshipped him there for a while, or anybody tried to start something. Because I mean, look at the ages in Jesus, 33, him 32. You know what I mean? The difference is Jesus was more peace and healing and stuff, and he, went out and conquered. But in a time where they sort of revered people who conquered and all of that, I wonder if anybody tried to lift him up to deity or God status back then. That's something to look into, isn't it there? But anyway, man, thank you all for watching this with me. I'll leave a link in the description to this video. This was quite interesting. Glad that I watched it. And hope you guys enjoyed it with me. Listen, man, you all take care of each other, alright? Cool runnings.